All right, everyone, welcome to another end of the year best of podcast with the Prog Report. This is Roy, and joining me is our special group this year. We have Dan Levy.
Hey
Say hello,
everyone.
you're on that side. Geoff Bailie on that side.
Hello.
Kyle Fagala and Prog Nick joining us again.
Hello, everybody.
Well, I think last year we had a sixth person. I think Victor joined us, but he couldn't make it this year. So we'll throw in some honorable mentions to try and include some of his. But it's been a crazy busy year. So many albums. We've reviewed so many, and a lot of, reunions and returns of really well-known bands and epics and box sets and all sorts of extravaganzas. So lots to cover. Some surprises, some new bands, all that kind of stuff. And we know that that this is always one that people that listen to us find out about some new albums that they missed or discover bands they didn't hear about and stuff like that. So hopefully that's the case this year. Just generally, guys, if anybody wants to just chime in before we get started on talking about some of the albums. I mean, Dan, what was your feeling of the year overall? Better than last year? Same?
I think it's around the same, man, because like last year we had one of my top albums, Rise Radiant. This year we got Transatlantic, Leprous, Neo Morse Band. It's just like a lot of quality stuff and very varied as well. It's a good variety. We got like we have stuff like Between the Buried and Me and DBA, and they are both quality albums and like all released on the same year. So a lot of variety if you like different sorts of styles in prog.
Yeah. Geoff, how about you?
Yeah, I suppose 2020 was a strange year in terms of probably a lot of the music that came out over the course of that year was constructed before lockdowns and such things kicked in. Obviously, then there's a period of time and you expect a knock-on effect. But I think most of the bands really got into their stride and certainly didn't let the prevailing conditions prevent them, and it certainly didn't stand in the way of there being an awful lot of good music produced during the course of the year, as we'll find out shortly.
Yeah. Kyle, as someone who's always busy, I mean, there were so many releases this year. Was it something where it was hard to listen to this many albums over 1 year? Because it's challenging at best, even for any of us, I think.
I do my best. So I would say that, like, looking at 2020 to 2021, I think 2021 is a better year. I think there was a greater variety of releases, and I think you see a lot of the lockdown, like post-lockdown releases, where a lot of the writing was probably done during that period of extra time, and so I think there's a lot of really creative work. And I have on my favorite songs of the year list a lot of songs that kind of evoke on themes of lockdown and of solitude and of what we kind of all went through during COVID. So I think this is actually the year that most gets at what we all went through in 2020. So and there was some of that last year, but I think this year is probably better in that way. I always struggle to listen to all the music. You guys are way better at that than I am. But man, this weekend has been an intense study session for me. So I've gotten to catch up on some stuff that I had missed. But no, I got to listen to most of this throughout the year. There's been some great releases. So
I tell you what's amazing about that is that, I try to listen to as many albums as we can, and we review so many, and between all of us, we cover so many different albums and styles that we like, and then we'll put out our album of the year and the Prog Report Awards, which has like some 30 some odd nominees. And then you'll still get in the comments, you guys forgot this and this and this and this and the other. And it's incredible. I'm like, how is that possible that, we still missed some more things that are worthy? And they very well might be, but my God, it's impossible to cover it all.
But I think
the doc,
I think in this style, we're very fortunate to be able to say like this in each and every year. It seems every time it gets better and better. We have like so much quality music around. It seems like every year it's more stuff, and it never fails. It's always good.
I think it's one of the blessings of this era that we're in. I think we're very fortunate. Nick, what about you? How was the year for you? Sort of recapping.
Yeah, our cup runneth over. I found it difficult to keep up with everything, quite honestly. And leading up to this podcast, I had a lot of catching up to do. It was a year which was a feast for proggers. kind of carried on from 2020, I suppose. I remember this time last year, I commented that Daniel Ek had made a comment that musicians need to make more music. Well, I mean, yet again in 2021, the prog scene has proved that it is highly prolific, and we're blessed. It's been a fantastic year, and I'm still discovering all the music. And I guess I will be into 2022. But yeah.
Well, and with that said, I mean, we already are on to anticipating some amazing releases next year, because we've had the Porkmetry single, the Virgilio Morse Jennings first single, Julia, just dropped, and that's coming out next year, and a bunch of stuff that's going to be coming down.
Who knows
pretty
what
soon.
else?
So 2022 is already going to be off to a good start. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We're each going to cover 3 albums. These aren't in any ranking, any particular order. What we did was we sort of discussed over ourselves the 15 that we felt covered the most ground, that we all liked the most, and then divided them up for each of us to kind of bring up and present and talk about. And, that sort of will be our rank, our overall kind of best of 2021. So I'll go ahead and get us started. I'm going to go, my first choice is the 4th album from Downs Braid Association, Halcyon Hymns, which I probably have talked about before earlier this year. Chris Braid and Geoff Downs make up the duo, and they always have a few guest musicians with them on their various albums, but it's largely up until this point been sort of an electro pop, very 80s influenced kind of music thing. This album, which I think is their best work, is a bit more organic, a bit more acoustic, and pianos and orchestration and things like that. Overall, I think all the songs are brilliant throughout. It's a great listen. It is a pop record ultimately, but I don't know. There's something still kind of prog about it. I feel like it just falls into that. It's very, very kind of old school, kind of British, kind of wistful kind of narration going on throughout different tracks. There's an 11-minute pseudo epic, I guess you would call it, called Remembrance at the end, which has a lot of heavy narration. Well, I should mention that David Longdon does provide backing vocals on one track, as well as Mark Almond and a few other people. Dave Bainbridge is a guitarist on this one. It's just a really great listen from beginning to end. I think the probably the first single and opening track, Level, was what's it called? Love Among the Ruins. I was going to say Love Will Find a Way, but Love Among the Ruins is probably one of my favorite songs of the year. And I think that it's actually a nice album to start this best of podcast. I think it's a sort of easy, mellow kind of intro into what this year was about, but it's an album that you can put on at any time and get through the whole thing and just really be in a good mood. That's how I sort of describe it. When I was looking for something to listen to and I wasn't in the mood for metal and I didn't know what I wanted to put on, I'm like, oh, I can put this on again. And it just stuck with me throughout the year, and I just enjoy it every time. So that's my first choice.
Yeah, Chris Braid has got such a great voice.
Yeah.
Fantastically crafted album. And I was a big fan of their last one, the Skyscraper Souls from also 2017. Good, yeah. And I think this follows in a similar sort of template, as you said, perhaps a little bit more pastoral in places. Dave Bainbridge, a fantastic addition on all sorts of stringed instruments, including guitars. And I think King of the Sunset, which is one of the tracks with David Longdon on it, is certainly one of my favorites from the year. But as you say, it's if you know, obviously Geoff Downs and Chris Braid. Well, Geoff has a history, and Chris even currently works very much in the pop genre, and this is kind of their, I suppose, his indulgence project, if you like. And getting a chance to work in a different format, but certainly that combination of the prog sensibility, but actually the brilliance of the songwriting makes it a tremendous listen.
Yeah. All right. So moving on. So let's get to our next album. I guess next on our list was going to be Nick, with your first item to talk about.
Okay, so in September, Cyan released their album For King and Country. Now, for those of us who have reached a certain age, and by that I mean Geoff and myself, you know,
Not the same age as you.
you know, when we were schoolboys, we dreamed of making music like our 70s prog heroes, classic era Genesis and Yes, and Robert Reed, who is the driving force behind Cyan, but also behind Magenta and various other bands. He was of the same mind. In 1983 odd, he was at school and decided that he wanted to put together a band that would reflect his 70s classic prog roots, and so he put together a demo of this very album For King and Country way back in 1983. He sent that demo out on cassette and eventually finally recorded it as Cyan in 1993. And after 3 albums, Cyan led to Magenta. Cyan, Magenta, get it?
Yeah.
Okay, so in my opinion, Rob Reed is one of the unsung heroes of prog. He really is. He constantly delivers very high quality material in various under various brand names. He's always doing something of note, and it's not without reason that he's respected as one of the top producers and really one of the prog luminaries of Europe, based in Wales. But in 2021, he decided to re-release For King and Country, but not just re-release it. He rewrote it. He got a whole new lineup for Cyan, and wow, what a lineup it was. Peter Jones, who impressed so much in the 2020 Prog from Home concert, who's known as the keyboard player of Camel and his own band Tiger Moth Tales. Luke Mashin of The Tangent, of Francis Dunnery's It Bites, and of his own band Machine, and on bass Dan Nelson and Tim Robinson on drums, a really incredible lineup. And what Reed did was completely rework the album and give it all the bells and whistles. And I've listened to the original 1993 release, and while it's wonderful, this takes it up to a whole new level. It really is very extravagant, very lush production, but not pompous sounding as some people might expect it to be. Great songs, fantastic prog that anybody who followed Genesis and Yes would love. It's got all the requisite Game of Thrones imagery, the songs about wizards, and a song about a war hero. And it's that kind of album where it's very hard to pick a particular favorite. So I'll just say to you, listen to it all. It really is emblematic of what we as followers of 70s prog love. 70s prog. It's great, got a great 5.1 surround mix, which is one of Rob Reed's specialities. And just in closing, to quote from Geoff's great review of the album, don't read the blurb and write it off as a rehash of old material. It's a band lineup that absolutely gels and shows each player in the best possible light. That's absolutely true. Spot on, Geoff. So Cyan's For King and Country.
Did you pull that quote off Wikipedia? Was that where
Geoff's everywhere, man?
Geoff Bailie was
Couldn't have said it better myself. Oh, wait, I did. Well, I think you're right. I totally agree, Nick, and I think I am really looking forward to seeing if that band then make an album under their own steam, because I think that's an absolutely fantastic lineup who could do amazing things.
That album was a surprise for me because I actually wasn't familiar with the original version, but when I did hear this version, Listen, it does sound very retro, no doubt, but it also has a freshness about it, and you know, Pete Jones's voice is just so amazing, and all the players and everybody are so top notch. The production is incredible, and again, it's one of those albums that I really hope that if anybody missed it, because it's not on a major label and it's put out independent, and I don't even think it's on Spotify or anything like that. So maybe this is a way to bring some attention to it. But it's definitely something you would enjoy if you like the music that we like. It is an album you will definitely enjoy. It's great stuff.
You can
You
get
can
it
get
on
it on
Bandcamp.
on Bandcamp.
Bandcamp, yeah.
Yeah.
And the Tiger Mothtails website also, I think, is where it's for
Yep.
sale. Okay, so next up, Dan, what do you got?
Okay, so around like 6 months ago, Roy and I did a podcast talking about the releases of the first half of the year, and we were already surprised by how much stuff was out at the time. And so now you doubled that, you got even more. But one of the albums that we both really enjoyed, and it's probably one of our mutual favorites, is the album Witness by the band Vola. So in case you aren't familiar with them, Vola is a prog metal band from Copenhagen that has been active for around 15 years or so. They're led by their vocalist and guitarist, man, I might butcher this, but it's Asger Miggen,
Yeah.
who's a British songwriter. And so Vola has an interesting sound. They sound very modern and like mix heavy guitars, like riffs, electronic sounds, but still has those elegant and lighter touches, which make it balanced and extremely enjoyable to listen to. So Witness has all of that. So many great tracks in this. The opening song, Straight Lines, fun fact, was my most listened to track of the year, according to my Spotify stats anyways. So you can see I really love them. A couple of other standout tracks, in my opinion, are 24 Light Years, which is more of a ballad, amazing song. Stone Leader Falling Down is a heavy, like headbanging track with one of the coolest breakdown riffs ever. And the perfect closer, in my opinion, is Inside Your Fur, which might be my favorite on the album. Like from the opening drum fill, it's a classic, to the incredible ending with the melodic choirs. And I mean, all in all, I love this record and I highly recommend it if you're a fan of this heavy, rhythmic, melodic sort of prog. Like say Tesseract or Porcupine Tree, some of the heavier moments in Devin Townsend. I think these are all of the influences for the band as well. So if you enjoy this kind of stuff, you definitely like this.
Yeah, I couldn't stop listening to this album. It's definitely one of my favorites. It's, you know, definitely some of my favorites this year include Dream Theater, Neil Morse Band, Transatlantic, and I would put this album right up there for me with those. I really thought it was great. You know, stylistically, I was thinking about it. There was an album a few years back that I was really into from that band Subsignal, La Muerta, I think it was called.
Yeah.
This album reminds me a lot of that sound and
Yeah.
style.
There's some of it here for sure.
It has really kind of heavy, dark, double bass metal undertones, but the melodies and the vocals are really bright, and the contrast of how the band does it is excellent. And,
Yeah,
and
well
it
said.
has definitely a modern sound. They had a few plays here, even on U.S. radio, with some of those songs. So I hope that's a band that continues to grow. They're really quite good.
Yep.
Okay, Kyle, you're up.
Yeah, let's do this thing. I enjoyed, of those that we just talked about, Downs Braid was great. I've listened to that since I finally decided to listen to it, and I listened to it a ton this weekend. It's awesome. And then also that Vola album is really great. So 24 Light Years made my favorite songs of the year.
That drum beat in that song is so
Yeah, it's
cool.
really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a great one. So I'm going to start with Between the Buried and Me. This is going to be Colors 2. And they've been around for, goodness, quite some time now. I think this is maybe their 7th or 8th studio album, depending on how you count The Anatomy of. But they are a technical prog band. If you aren't familiar with them, they do this sort of thing where they'll switch from sort of smooth melodic vocals to growling vocals, all while playing a super eclectic mix of musical styles. And so there's a few bands that do this, but on some level I think they're maybe the best at it. This album, it reminds me of an album, Empath, from 2019, Devin Townsend's. It kind of has that, you never know what you're going to get. It's going to like kind of take a, turn this way or that way into something just crazy, and there's a lot going on from a production standpoint. This specific album, it's a sequel to their 2007 album that, as I understand, was kind of when I first became aware of them. And it's on some level like their breakthrough album. So the 2007 album, Colors, it had a song on Rock Band, for whatever that's worth. That was a big deal to me at the time, sequel to the prequel. I guess I'll say this, and we were talking about this before the show, but it's a lot of music, and it's kind of what they're known for. It's 80 minutes. It ends with a 15-minute epic called Human as Hell, another one with love in parentheses, which closes the album out. But I mean, just the album in general, it's very dense. Each song has a ton going on, and you can kind of say it's a challenging album. So it's almost like, I don't know, like a 3.5-hour film or something, like a French film. But it's one of these things that, like, with more listens, you're going to like it more and more and more. If you don't like growling vocals, you may not like it, and I do struggle with that. But there's a lot going on here in this album that is really good and worth listening to. Here's a fun fact, because I always, in some way or another, talk about Mike Portnoy. Their first single, Fix the Error, does have a drum solo by Mike Portnoy on it. So this is definitely one that Vic should be reviewing. But I know there's a couple of us here that like it, and so in honor of Vic, this is Between the Buried and Me.
Yeah, I know he definitely is a big fan of this record. They're a band that I always struggle with listening to as much as I think maybe I should, because when their albums first come out, I like them. I think Tommy Rogers is a really good vocalist, Blake Richardson and all those guys. I mean, they're incredible musicians. It's just like what you're saying. It's always hard to put one of their albums on and listen to it from beginning to end, because it just like tears your face off after about 25 minutes. It's just relentless. And then you look at it and you go, oh my God, there's like 40 more minutes. I just can't do it. And so because the music's bad, it's just so much going on for every second of the time it's playing.
Was that
crazy.
what they split their last album into
well,
two parts, maybe?
I thought that was the perfect way to do it. They split the last one into part 1 and part 2. They were like EPs. Each one was about maybe 4 or 5 tracks. And it was much more easily digestible that way, I thought. You know what I mean?
Yeah, when I think about the band Between the Buried and Me, it's an interesting thought about like how prog covers so many different sounds. I think there's a subset of prog fans that when they think of the genre, they first think about Between the Buried and Me, Periphery, and these kind of bands. While we as a group, excluding Victor, we usually go on around different paths. So it's funny, you can like ask someone, hey, are you a prog fan? Yeah. And then you have two people, like, let's say Nick and Vic, have like totally separate tastes. And every time I listen to it, it always gets like a subject of interest in my mind.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the one thing that's cool about our group and about, like you're saying, about the genre, is that you can have DBA, Cyan, and Between the Buried and Me and call them all prog. And they're all completely different in every which way.
Yeah.
But the thing with a prog fan is that you can appreciate all of those because you find the quality in it. That's the whole thing. The story is that they're telling. I know Geoff has struggles with the growl vocals of a Between the Buried and Me, but I would imagine he could listen to it and go, okay, these guys are clearly good musicians and there's a lot of thought into this. I can appreciate it from that angle, even though it may not be something I listen to. So I think that's, I think at least the bottom level, how they all sort of relate. All right. So, Geoff, your first record.
Okay. So the first one I've got is one that I reviewed recently on the site. It's just very recently come out. Ross Jennings, A Shadow of My Future Self. And I suppose if you follow these podcasts or this website at all, Ross is certainly a distinctive voice in the genre today. And it's his voice that is very much the constant in this album, because it goes through all sorts of twists and turns of musical styles and moods. Starts off with a sort of harmony-laden acoustic track, Better Times, switches to one of the singles, Words We Cannot Say, which is almost like 80s pop rock. Into Violet, which is a kind of almost funk type track. It's an album of lots of melody and big choruses, and Rocket Science has one of those jazz elements in Young at Heart. It's really a brilliant sort of musical cornucopia, to use a very large word that I don't think we've used on this podcast before. And yeah, just a really I really enjoyed this. I mean, it's a running joke that I'm not, certainly there are bigger Haken fans than me within this group, but this album really resonated with me. Simon Sandez, killer drums throughout. The track Feelings with a video that's like Daniel Levy's Dream World, with its Nintendo elements, and a track like Phoenix as well, which is probably a more prog based track, and it ends with a bonus track of a Dua Lipa cover. What else could you add into the mix? So it's an album that I've really enjoyed. I've visited a lot. Great to play on a car journey, and again, I think it just shows a whole other side to Ross that Haken and Novena don't even tap into. So yeah, certainly on one of my favorites of the year.
The word that came to mind when I heard the album was elegant. Everything was just so elegant and silky smooth on that album. Wonderful production, and the polar opposite of I guess what your traditional Haken fan has come to expect, and it just shows the versatility of the man. Wonderful musician.
Well, he's having a moment in the sun. I mean, with standing out from the shadow of what Haken is with this solo record, and now the track Julia with Nick DiVirgilio, Neil Morstead on that new album that he's doing. I mean, certainly to be asked to be included with those two for that, is a big deal, and it shows, what people think of him, and that he's really a talent. And his songwriting is really impressive on this record, and it's a really enjoyable album. And of course, we should mention another great track from it, Grounded, which is one of my favorites, which Mr. Levy over here did the video for.
Yep,
Brilliantly.
very honored. Love that song, and love Apologist as well. It's another one of my favorites. Great drums. Overall, great record, and a symbol of what an insanely talented musician Ross is.
Yeah, really is, and highly recommend to check that out. So that's our first round of records. We did DBA, Cyan. What was yours, Dan?
Vola.
Between the Buried and Me and Ross Jennings. So nice little first round of records to check out. I imagine some of those might be some things you missed, so we hope that it drives you to check them out and maybe buy something. Okay, so my second album is another one of my favorites. I feel like some of these records, when I think about them, it feels like it was last year. It's such a long time ago that I was listening to Altitude by Life Signs. And I feel you guys can maybe vouch for this, but if there was one record that I harassed our group of fans about more, I can't believe it. There was one. I mean, this was like, I was the only one that was listening to it at the time, and I think I was every day going, "You have to listen to this record. You have to listen to this record," and I just fell in love with it. It was John Young. We'll give a little recap. I mean, Life Signs formed in 2014. It's the brainchild of John Young, who's a well-known studio musician and worked with everybody from, John Wetton to Bonnie Tyler and all sorts of other things. And this is their third album, I believe. The last one was Cardington, which came out in 2017. And fully funded by fans. They don't do Spotify. They don't do anything like that as well. Another one of those things. And noted fact, another one with Dave Bainbridge on guitar, which adds to my DBA connection. I think the thing that struck to me with this one is the opening title track, which is a long epic, Altitude, where John described the lyrics to us, which I didn't catch at the time, but it was one of those guys that operates the drones in the military from afar, just drops bombs on cities, and then has to feel the weight of that, and goes home, every day to his bed, and has to struggle with what he just did, which is so deep and intense. But when you listen to the beauty of that track, it's just overwhelming. A few other tracks that are great. Gregarious, which is another good pop rocker in there, which kind of has a Pink Floyd "Comfortably Numb" kind of ending. I feel like, which is really cool. And then there's a track, "Last Train Home," which is, my goodness, one of the best power ballads you'll hear this year. Which is a song that he had recorded with John Wetton. What was Jeff? What was the name of the group that they did that with?
Flango, and it's called Last One
Flango.
Home. You're
Last
thinking
One Home.
Flang.
I was gonna say
You're
John
thinking
Mayer.
John
Colors.
Mayer or Flank Colors, yeah.
I'm getting my words mixed up.
Not
But
John Mayer.
Yeah,
last-
Roy, you stole that one from me. I'm going to have to sue you. in the
well, you did the
court of
review
the-
for it. You did the review for it on our website, so you had the
Yeah.
moment there. And
Court
well,
of the Crimson King, right?
yeah, and yeah. So again, in revisiting that album again before this, it just reminded me how much I do like this record. I think it's easily their best one, and I hope it's a band that continues to put more music out. But again, if it's one that you missed because it's not on Spotify or anything like that, I would just tell you, just go ahead and get it. It's great. You won't be disappointed by this record. It is prog, and everything that comes with it is prog rock in the purest sense that you would like.
Yeah, it's very good.
It's also got the moment of the year on it, in my opinion.
Are we in agreement? Is it the middle of Altitude? Is that what we're talking
It's
about?
the middle of Altitude.
Yeah.
You'll know it when you hear it, folks.
Yeah.
You'll know it when you hear it. Absolutely brilliant.
It
Absolutely.
was your song of the year, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
My number one.
top 5 for me for sure. Okay, Nick, your next one.
Okay, so this one comes with more than a hint of sadness and poignancy. In July, Big Train released Common Ground. Now, you know, in preparation for this podcast a couple of weeks ago, when you told us it was going to happen, Roy, you know, I started collecting my thoughts, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna start this one with a comment about how, you know, Big Train nearly broke up before they released this album, and I was going to make a little joke about that. Well, it's not funny anymore, because even though the band came back stronger than ever, of course, and that's all true, we now all know about the sudden and tragic death of David Longdon just last month in November. Talk about a year of change for that band. Wow. First, they had 3 departures: Rachel Hall, Danny Manners, and Dave Gregory. The band survived that. They came back stronger than ever with this album, Common Ground. And it's got everything that the Big Train fan base called the Passengers would expect, with a slightly harder edge. The band even announced another album, Welcome to the Planet, which is going to be released next year. And then suddenly David was dead. So nothing more to be said about that, other than looking past the tragedy to the album itself. Well, it's kind of loosely based on Rob Cowan's book, Common Ground. And for those who haven't heard it, it's not Grimspound on the one hand, it's heavier than that, but it's not the Underfall Yard on the other. It's more experimental than that. It is BBT to its core. Some amazing tracks on it. For me, the high points were Apollo. I love also All the Love We Can Give. Now, both of those are Nick DiVirgilio compositions. So Call Me a Fan. I guess it's well known that I follow him.
Nick likes
closely.
Nick.
Yeah, exactly. Which was nice to see, you know, Nick giving more compositional input and also vocal input, ironically, prior to David's death. And then, of course, the epic on the album, which is called Atlantic Cable. So the question everybody's going to be asking and speculating on now is, well, will the band continue, and will they replace David Longdon, or will Nick DiVirgilio step up to the mic yet again for the second second time in his career to front a band that has lost its vocalist. We don't know. But the album itself is a fantastic legacy for David. It has some very hooky, poppy numbers, like the opener, the Strangest Times, which is about everything that's been going on in the world, of course. But it's also got some extremely complex moments. The song I mentioned, Apollo, written by Nick, is an instrumental, and Nick describes it as the band's Los Endos, which I think is a pretty accurate description. The album is full of David's very typical storytelling, the theme of human commonality, stories about laying steel cables across the Atlantic Ocean. And you know, there are moments of humor on the album as well. I don't know if you guys saw the video that the band shared on their blog about the making of Atlantic Cable. It's quite hilarious. It shows Nick trying to figure out the incredibly intense and difficult time signatures in the song Atlantic Cable, and he ends up swearing at Greg Sporton and using some expressive language in trying to work it out. Looking back on that, it's all the more poignant. You know, you can see that these guys loved and love each other, and they are so much more than, as one reviewer described them, the ultimate big band prog group. They are and were an amazing band, and Common Ground is made all the more poignant and attractive to listen to because it is some of David Longdon's last work in his life. So give it a listen, those of you who haven't. Go and buy it. It is a wonderful legacy to David Longdon and the rest of the band. Big Trains, Common Ground.
I think it's a great album to, if you're not a fan or have never listened to them, it's a good album to get introduced to the band, because there's a lot of accessible tracks in there, so starting with the opener, and some great ballads in there, and even the title track is sort of a regular, simple kind of pop single. For me, the best song is the closer, End Notes, which is as beautiful a song as they've ever written. But on the whole, I thought it was a fantastic album, one that really starts off differently. When I was first listening to it from the beginning, it throws a few curveballs at you from what you're used to from them, which I thought was nice. They found a way to tweak their sound just enough to refresh some things, and without taking things too drastically to a different place. Yeah, again, we can talk. We did do a podcast on the loss of David and how terrible it is, and I don't want to get into talking about that too much now. It's a devastating loss to the music and the band. But you're right, to memorialize him with this album, I think is a good place.
I think the band has had a very, very natural evolution. They haven't done a whole lot of radical right or left turns along the way, and in the context of what they've done right the way through, I think this is a very natural next step. A lot of different elements, but actually not something that is going to alienate their fan base, and gradually starting to pepper in Carly and Dave and Claire, the new members, throughout this album, and I think most of them play a larger part in the next album as well. So I'm sure this time next year we'll be talking about it.
Well, there's already been, I think, 4 singles released from the upcoming record, Welcome to the Planet, which comes out next month. So that stuff's already out there, and that album will be out soon, and that's also been great stuff. They never disappoint. In the last 10 years, they have not put out something I've disliked. So that's a great band. Okay, Dan, your next one.
Okay, let's go. Let's talk about one of the biggest albums of the year, the new Dream Theater album. A view from the top of the world. So we got a lot to say. So let's go. This album has a very interesting story, and from the way it was made, the pandemic made them cut their tour short. So rather than doing nothing, they decided to go to their headquarters and start writing and recording a new album. So that's the same place. Both the John Petrucci solo album and Liquid Tension Experiment 3 were recorded just last year. And unfortunately, due to that travel restrictions, James Labrie couldn't be there, and he contributed through Zoom while the other guys tracked and arranged everything. And unlike the previous album, Distance Over Time, which is also very good, this time they didn't set any limits on song lengths or a specific style or tone. They instead tried to go for their classic heavy and prog style akin to Scenes from Memory and A Change of Seasons. And in my opinion, they definitely succeeded. This record has everything you'd want as a Dream Theater fan. The crazy instrumental parts, they are super creative this time. The songwriting on the slower sections is top notch. There's nothing cheesy or over exaggerated. And I think one of very important factor, an aspect in my opinion, is that they really respected James's range, and his vocal lines sound really great in this album. So yeah, my favorite songs are Answering the Call, which has been on repeat for me all year. I love the riffs. I love the chorus. It's a really good track. Very addicting. And also Awaken the Master, which is the debut of John Petrucci's 8-string action. And of course, the epic title track, which it's a journey and it just goes everywhere. And it's very fun to listen to and very creative. So since our resident mixing enthusiast Victor is missing, I thought I would make a comment about the production of the album, and what that's an aspect that blows my mind in so many different ways. Andy Sneap has nailed their sound to such a level. I think it might be one of the best sounding albums ever made, in my humble opinion. And it really sounds amazing. So yeah, great album, definitely on the upper echelon of their new era's catalog. And I'd assume mostly everyone listening to this podcast has checked it out, but if you haven't, it's a good time.
Best thing they've done since Octavarium, which was the best thing they did since Images and Words.
Well, like Dream Theater album rankings is a very touchy subject.
What?
So let's not go there. Yeah.
If we did a ranking right here with the five of us, we'd all have five completely different orders.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Definitely would.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely biased on this one because I did get a chance to write the liner notes for the art book and the box set and listen to the album early and all of that stuff. I love this record. I'm a big fan, so I don't have a bad thing to say. But I will add on to your comment about the production. It's just an insanely clean, crisp, dynamic sounding record. It's astonishing, you could say. Yeah, sound wise, it's brilliant, just awesome. So yeah, if you like, again, I think it boils down to very simply, if you like Dream Theater in sort of the classic sense, the Images and Words, Scenes from Memory, Change of Seasons, that kind of stuff, there's nothing to dislike about this record. Yep. And I think that's sort of easily the way to put it.
To me, it's their best Mangini era album. I think it's the most balanced, and it feels like they finally landed on a singular approach to kind of what they're trying to do. And the last album did that too, I think. But to me, this one really nails that.
Yeah. You got to hand it to Mangini for his performance. It's I think his most organic performance with Dream Theater.
I agree.
It doesn't sound machine-like at all, which is something he's been criticized.
And he actually played on a smaller kit than he normally does, instead of that monster, recording wise, which is
some of that's got to be the mix too. It was better on Distance Over Time than it had been on previous albums, but on this one it really does sound great. And he plays.
They figured out his sound for sure. It took a few records.
Yeah.
But yeah, right on. Okay, so let's see. Kyle, your next one.
All right. I'm not sure which one I'm supposed to do next. even
Your
after
call.
all that clamoring about order.
Your call.
I apologize. Geoff, I'm going to go with an album that I think you liked. I'm going to go with Liquid Tension Experiment, LTE 3. Liquid Tension Experiment, I think probably everyone's familiar with them. They are an instrumental prog supergroup formed in 97. They released albums in 98 and 99. And they are made up of Mike Portnoy, guitarist John Petrucci, keyboardist Jordan Rudess, and bassist Tony Levin. And as a kid, that was like a big deal. Both of those two albums, it was like the greatest thing that could exist in my 17-year-old mind or whatever. Of course, then Jordan joined Dream Theater, so it kind of became a little bit pointless. They had a couple live releases and things, but they've not done anything officially in the last 21 years. And so it's a big moment, of course, to have bandmates John, Jordan, and Mike back together on a recording. And of course, they flirted with different things. Jordan was on the cruise with Mike, and Mike recorded on Petrucci's solo album last year. But this was a big moment, and I think there was a lot of excitement about it being released. For me personally, and I've been trying to figure this out because I should have just absolutely loved this album, but I don't think it matches the first two albums. Some of that's probably just time, and maybe it's just inevitable that it's not going to. And then some of it is it just has a little bit more of a heavy feel to it than maybe those first two albums. And so, of course, that's subjective, and some people would probably prefer this album. I really like kind of the spontaneous, sort of ad-libbed, like experimental type stuff that to me is more indicative of their first couple albums. They've got like a 20-30 minute track that just is them improvising. I miss that, although there is a bonus disc that does have 6 improv songs on it. And so I think I actually missed the bonus disc when this came out, and then I've gone back later and listened to it, and I think I prefer that bonus disc. Somehow that speaks to me more than the regular disc does. But there's some great songs on there. The opening track, Hypersonic, which is the one that they teased, it feels to me like a new spin on Paradigm Shift a little bit. I mean, it's really cool. It's musically super amazing. They finally got a studio version of Rhapsody in Blue down, which is a classic Jordan moment from their live concerts. There's great songs. There's a song on my top tracks of the year, Blink of an Eye, which is the opening kind of ad-lib song that I think is great. I think it's as good as anything on the main disc. And so it's a cool track. It's definitely one that deserves a spot. It's, I guess, the only instrumental album that we'll have on here. And I have continued to go back to it. And so it definitely stands up with the first and second album. Maybe I don't like it quite as much, but let's be honest, it's great to have this album this year and to have these guys back together. And I hope they tour somehow and I get to go see them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think the long track, Key to the Imagination, is one that when I first got the album, I like, this is a long track, instrumental, Liquid Tension Experience. This is the stuff that I live for. And it took me a few spins to really get it. But after I did, I love that track so much. That one, I think Passage of Time too is an amazing track. But what I would like to highlight is the track Shades of Hope, which is an improv by Jordan Rudess and John Petrucci. I think it's a short 2-minute track, but it was all improvised in one take. They did it in one take, hit record, and yep, it's done. And it is a testament to their talent and to their chemistry and synergy. I think it's one of the most impressive things on the whole album, just because of this fact alone. So yeah, beautiful. Love this album, just in general. I agree that it's a different time from when they first did those two. So what's more normal for them is to go a bit heavier and have the rhythm be a certain way. So it definitely feels different, but it feels still like LT, and it's the stuff that we like, at least that I love. So yeah, LT 3, I agree. Great
I
album.
think plainly having them back together doing something was just great. It was for all of us that grew up on those two records, having a chance to see them do anything again. And I mean, let's face it, it's still really great. It's hard to match up to those two records, but it's a fantastic album. And to have them back together doing anything was just a treat. It made the year better. for me.
Definitely.
Which I think
Agreed.
is really great.
I enjoyed the first two albums, so I think there was a really nice kind of journey from John Petrucci's solo album through to LTE3, through to the Dream Theater album. In terms of just that kind of what they've been doing, I suppose, particularly what John and Jordan have been doing. And Jordan's been very, very active on Patreon over lockdown, and that's something I've plugged into, and I think got a good appreciation of everything that went into the making of the album. I think the blend of the arranged and the improvised on it is really, really strong. I just think it all fits together really, really well.
Petrucci's on just a tremendous creative streak, and in a span of about 12 to 14 months, he released Terminal Velocity, his solo record, LTE3, and the new Dream Theater, and that's just a lot of riffs.
Yeah.
I mean, that you got to come up with a ton of stuff.
Yeah, he's a riff machine.
I don't know how he remembers it all.
It's amazing. Yeah, amazing stuff. All right, Geoff, you're up.
Hey, so again, if you listen to our podcast, you'll know I'm a big Yes fan. So let's face it, 3 albums since 2001. So it's always a big year when there's a new Yes album, and probably like a lot of these releases, it sort of came as a little bit of surprise to us. People had been expecting it, but wondering, would it ever appear? Obviously, significantly, the first album since Chris Squire passed away, and indeed the first to really, primarily feature Steve Howe as producer and the driving seat really on this album. It's got contributions from Howe, Davidson, Jeff Downes, Billy Sherwood. They've all written in various combinations to the extent that was possible under lockdown. And I suppose I call it's a classic album length. It's about 45 to 50 minutes. There are some bonus tracks, and I think they're probably more of a distraction actually from what's in the main album. And I think with every Yes lineup, there will be variations in the sound, in the focus, and I think this really is, I viewed this as a new lineup and a new approach. There's absolutely no doubt the guitar is very much at the forefront of everything that's happening. And probably its feel is maybe more relaxed than probably some of the more frantic music in the earlier parts of their career. But I think sonically using using Davison, Howe, and Sherwood's vocals, using an orchestra, using a variety of styles, they've come up with something that I think is a really worthy addition to their catalogue. And as we have come to expect, it's got great packaging, a fantastic box set and art book version from their first album on Inside Out. And overall, it's an album that I'm pleased has been released, and an album that I've really enjoyed this year.
Look, I'm a Yes fan. So no matter what, as controversial as the style might be, the lineup, whatever, if Yes release an album, it's a good year. And, I will say this, Heaven and Hell was a massive disappointment to me. It just didn't hit the mark at all. And I went even so far as to questioning whether this was Yes at all. Whereas now in 2021, under the stewardship of Steve Howe, they seem to be getting back to who Yes are and what fans would expect. So in that respect, we gotta love it, we gotta respect it, and we gotta welcome and embrace it.
I mean, there's a lot of good songs on it. Again, it just is a matter of if you're willing to remove yourself from needing it to be close to the edge or topographic oceans or something. But if you just take it at face value for what it is, there's a lot of good songs. They're well written, well performed. Steve Howe plays great. The production is probably the best they've had in a long time. I really like Future Memories. I thought it was a really nice little ballad that has a good melody there. Living Island, I think, is a nice closer. And then I think for most people, when they heard the Ice Bridge,
Great song.
I think that's a really good rock track that
Yeah.
unfortunately there's not more of that on the record. I think if it simply had one or two more of that kind of up tempo kind of power to it on a couple more songs, that might have elevated the album a little bit, because that song is actually
Didn't
really,
you get the
really
feeling though
great.
that there's more to come? Didn't you get the
I don't know.
sense that
I feel like Steve Howe never wants to stop. He doesn't seem like he ever wants to quit. He's into this. So, yeah, I could see another record, but they have not intimated one way or another. So, who knows?
I think it's great that Alan White's drumming on it, and you can, as a fan of drums, you can hear his age in his drumming, but it's still Alan White. And it's just great that after all these years, he's still doing what he does.
Yeah, for sure. So, and again, I mean, they had a number of tour dates that have, been said and canceled multiple times over the whole COVID period. So, hopefully they'll be able to get back on the road. I think they were doing Relayer. Was that the tour? Was that the last one that they were doing?
Yep.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed for May 2022 in Europe.
Your tickets? You have tickets?
I've got tickets. I've had tickets for nearly 3 years. Yeah.
I've got tickets. They're not on the cruise. Is this the first year they're not on Cruise to the Edge? I mean,
They won't be.
I was
Yeah,
just going to
this
say,
is-
well, surely there'll be a last minute surprise about that now that they've released an album.
They have not been announced. They're not expected to be on the next one. So, in May of 22. Okay, so let's see. What did we cover? Let's try and remember. We had Life Signs, Big Big Train, Dream
Dream
Theater.
Theater. You always forget mine, dude.
I know. Dream Theater and Liquid Tension, and yes. So that's the next round. Man, some heavy hitters in that second
Good
round.
stuff.
My goodness.
Yeah.
They didn't even make the final round. What could possibly be in the final round of albums? All right, so for my last pick, I'm gonna talk about, man. If you would have told me at the beginning of this year that one of my favorite albums of this year and one that I would talk about so highly at the end of this podcast would be from Styx, I would not have expected that. But I think it's, I wrote it down here, 17th studio album, Crash of the Crown, is easily one of my favorites of this year. It's just an incredible record. It's, again, Styx is not thought of as the traditional prog group in the style of yes, Genesis and that things. I mean, certainly their early days had a lot of heavy prog stuff to it, and then they became a massive pop band with mega hits on rock radio. The last couple of records, going back to the one that preceded this, The Mission from 2017, was also a return to a bit more of a progressive sound with more keyboard solos and guitar solos, and that was a concept album. This one is maybe a sort of a loosely based concept. It ties into a lot of what we're all dealing with COVID and lockdown and being disconnected from one another, and there's a lot of lyrical references to that kind of thing. Other than that, I wouldn't say that it's really a concept album like The Mission was. But again, it approaches that prog territory for them. The title track is very eclectic, very Queen influenced. There's a track also called Common Ground. The Big Big Trains, has their version. They have one, and that's also a really cool proggy influenced track on there. Reveries is a great rock single. Sound the Alarm, one of my top tracks of the year. Just a powerful, emotional ballad where Tommy Shaw just sings his brains off. And it's just amazing. It is an album that is short, concise. It's about 45, 50 minutes of about 14 songs. They all go one right into the other, into the other, into the other. There's no waste. You can put it on, and it is really one of those albums. You get to song 5 and you're like, man, that's a great song, and immediately song 6 starts and you're like, that's a great song too, and it just continues, and you cannot, it makes it difficult to want to stop it and just decide I'm going to stop listening now, because it just doesn't let up. It's a great record. I think it's one of the best records from Styx I can remember in a long time. and it's one that has definitely stuck with me. It was produced by Will Ivanovich, I think is how we say his name, and he's a initial guitarist musician that I think has since become a full member of the band and tours with them. Shout out to Lawrence Gowan, who again great vocals on here, and Todd Zuckerman, whose drumming is always amazing. But I mean, this is all Tommy Shaw has just become someone to really admire. The way his voice is held up and just possibly even gotten better over the last 20 years is truly commendable. He's an amazing singer and frontman for that band. So I'm happy to see that live. They do play a few songs from this album, as they should. I think all these bands that make these amazing new records should not be held to just playing their hits. Play 3 or 4 of these and put them out there, because they're absolutely worthy and as good as anything in their catalog. So I highly recommend this album. I can't talk about it enough.
I absolutely love this album. Every second of it. I mean, since you sent it to us, Roy, I can hardly stop playing the thing. Really, coming out the other side, and as you said,
oh, that's such a great song too. Yeah.
Wow. It really is Styx at their best. And if you're a fan of classic Styx, go get this album. You won't be sorry. And big shout out to Todd Zuckerman, who is one of the unsung heroes of the drumming world.
I think Will Ivankovich, who you mentioned earlier on, has played a key part in this album and played a key part in the mission. He hooked up with Tommy Shaw through Tommy's last solo album, and he's become an MVP, I think, in this whole lineup. And I think it's that brilliant blend of respecting the legacy of the band, but also just producing great music. There's nothing. I think the longest track in the album is about 4 minutes long. Certainly, 2.5, 3 minute tracks, prevail. And yes, someone did come in the door behind me.
Well, they're not cleaning windows, so that's okay.
They're not cleaning windows. I think there's, a brilliant use of all the musicianship within that band, all of the vocal blends within the band, and a shout out as well to I think the album's about 40 minutes long, and there were 2 tracks that they didn't put on it, The Same Stardust and Age of Entropia, and they've put those out on an EP with some live material, and those 2 songs are equally as good as what's on there. I mean, they just seem unstoppable at this point, and as you say, brilliant. Massive respect for to the band for going and putting 3, 4, 5 of these songs straight into their live sets, and certainly watching footage online would suggest it's going down so well.
Yeah. So what I like about this record too is that all the vinyls that come out now, they're all double, triple vinyls because the albums are so long, and there is something cool about just it's a one vinyl, 2 sides, that's it.
Yep.
You get 5, 6, 7 songs on each side, not 2 songs on each side that you have to keep flipping over records. I just love that old school thing about it, and I think that they even manicured the record for that purpose. Yeah, when I talked to Todd Zuckerman about that, and they were really focused on that. They did not want filler, they did not want to extend it. They wanted one record for it, and I think that's cool. I love that.
Yeah, it's sort of an indictment on our attention spans that things are moving towards like the default on Spotify at one point was to like shuffle albums, I think as Adele actually got that changed. But and so we were talking about earlier how, Between the Buried and Me is an 80-minute album. We can't handle that. So maybe that's an indictment of us. But at the same time, I love for an album to just be like 35 minutes. You think of like Van Halen 1984, it's like 36 minutes long or something, and it's great. Like, there's something to say about an album being what it is, just like a film. Like, if it can work just as well at 90 minutes, it should,
Well, when you had that limitation, all those bands, Genesis and all, they certainly wrote tons of songs, and you really had to sit and live with those songs and pick the 8, maybe 9 or 10 that fit. You really ended up with, in most cases, the cream of the crop that landed on there. And that's why some of those albums are stand the test of time, I think, maybe. You're right, but maybe there's something to
Totally.
that. But certainly there is that thing. Well, hey, we wrote 14 songs. Let's put all 14 out because we think they're great, and then everything ends up on a record. And you have 3 vinyls. So, anyway, um, moving on. Who's next? Nick, your second one. Your final one. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah. So who else that you can think of would start an album with a little girl's voice saying, "Hello and welcome to the rest of your life. Before we begin this short journey, please sit back, relax, and remember, enjoy yourselves, you scum."
Scum.
There's only one band, and that, of course, is Frost and their 2021 release in May, Day and Age. I absolutely love this album. It's amazing to think that this is only Frost's 4th studio album, but it is. What I love most about Frost is not only their startling musicianship, their incredible chops, their wonderful songwriting and all that, but they do it with such a distinctive British humor. Those of you who have ever been to a Frost concert, you'll know that I mean, there's a lot of humor that's thrown into the live events, and I think that shines through on this album. The whole theme of it is that you enjoy yourself, and that theme comes up in various forms throughout the album, and that kind of reveals not only the band's deep sense of irony and humor, but very often also a bit of a dark aspect too. There's a lot of circumspection around that, and they revisit that theme throughout the album. Now, one of the remarkable things about the album is that Frost are officially now a 3-piece after the departure of Craig Blundell, leaving Jem Godfrey, John Mitchell, and Nathan King. But in typical Jem Godfrey fashion, they went in and filled that gap, not with one drummer, but with 3 real heavy-hitting drummers. Kaz Rodriguez, who's a kind of a drummer who plays with Chaka Khan and Josh Groban. Darby Todd, who will be the tour drummer, who's going to perform this material live. And then none other than Pat Mastelotto from King Crimson and Mr. Mister. So with this lineup, you can actually hear the band literally enjoying themselves throughout the production. And of course, it's got it all. The standout song for me is the title track, Day and Age, which very often Mitchell's vocal comes through as living in a dying age. Sometimes it sounds like, and that might be intentional or not. It's got this incredible suspense-filled harmonic riff, and at 12 minutes, it's a moment of brilliance, as good as anything that Frost have done in the past. And I will include Million Town in that, which is a classic prog album, in my opinion. But it's not just the title track. Terrestrial, Island Life, Repeat to Fade, which is a Pat Mastelotto masterclass. I mean, just imagine if John Bonham and John Paul Jones, I think I said in the review, were playing prog in 2021. This is what it would sound like. So the album, while highly technical, is also very soulful. It shows massive musical prowess, production under the guidance of Jem Godfrey, of course. And while going to new territories, it absolutely has that sound that we all have come to love from Frost since Million Town. So possibly my favorite album of the year, when everything is taken into account, composition, performance, production, lineup, and everything else. And for those of you who have not listened to it or don't have a copy, go get it. You have no choice but to enjoy yourselves. Frost's Day and Age.
You scums.
You scum. Yeah.
You scum.
So I have to say a couple things. This is, as of right now, we don't have VIX picks. Vix Pix and Kyle Graves in yet, but this is the only song we all picked for our favorite of the year. The same song, because that opener is that good. And I had no idea that was Kaz Rodriguez. I follow him on Instagram. He's incredible. Like you said, drummer's drummer. I didn't know that was him drumming on that, but that makes all the sense in the world. So, Devin Townsend did that same thing on Empath. He had 3 different drummers. I don't know if that's like a kind of developing thing where you get these studio greats and give them a few tracks, and it kind of adds to the texture and the eclectic nature of an album or something, but that's interesting.
Yeah, that opening song, the title track, is just so great. It
We're all
might be my
fans.
favorite song by that band, maybe next to the, Million Town track itself. But I just love that the whole feel of that song. It's as good an opener and just driving kind of rock track that could have been a hit in multiple eras. I think it's just really great, and I wish that would be a band that would tour more and make more records and be more consistent, because they're really one of the sort of darlings of the critics and sort of the underground fan base. Everybody really wants to love this band and love everything that John Mitchell does and so on, but they really shine when they do Frost. It would be great if they just continue to do some more stuff. It's been very long between each album.
Well, John and Jem are now doing a weekly Facebook post presentation, which in the lead
They're
up
funny.
to the
They're
tour,
great to watch. Yeah.
Yeah, it just indicates that they're taking Frost very seriously,
Yeah. Well, that podcast you and I did with them was a lot of fun. That's all.
Right.
Just this past year we did, where we picked our pop prog tracks or whatever. And that was a lot of fun. That's out there if you want to check it out.
It's like talking to prog virtuoso comedians.
Yeah. Yeah. A
Ridiculous.
lot of joking involved. Okay, Dan, your last one.
Okay, so not sure where to begin with this one. It's Lapras Aphelion, and I got a lot to talk about.
Just
So-
keep your pants on, okay?
Okay, I will.
All right, let me get situated.
Yeah, please get comfortable. You can read my full review if you want on the website. It might have been the longest I've ever written, but I mean, let's just say this would have been my album of the year if Transatlantic wasn't a thing. So let's go. Lapras is definitely one of the biggest bands in our genre now. They do things in such a unique way, the way they approach vocal line melodies, transitions, rhythm and drum lines, and driving the songs, and electronic sounds included in instrumentalism. I mean, I could go on. It's just so refreshing in general. And Aphelion is another one of those albums that was made during COVID, and lyrically, it brings forward a bunch of these themes: isolation, loneliness, impotence, anxiety, depression, etc. And their singer Einar has talked about how on the previous album Pitfalls, they approach these themes in a more somber manner, like just a darker tone. And now it's much more in line of how do I deal with this? It's more mature, aware, and clear-headed. Like, don't worry, it's still super melancholic and depressive, but anyways, it hits home for me. A lot of those lyrics are expertly crafted to make you feel things, and because they are authentic, and this is good. On the more musical side, though, I think it's Lapras doing what they do, but in the best way possible. So not to say there's no uniqueness here. I think there's a lot, but it also feels like a homage to their best moments. I absolutely adore all the songs here, and it could go on about each of them for minutes, but I'll highlight just a few. Like the single Silent Revelation, combining many of their classic elements and adding stuff like cellos and their classic ahs. So, yeah. My personal favorite is Shadow Side with a catchy chorus and amazing guitar solo. Castaway Angels, which follows the classic Lapras formula of building and building towards a climax, but this one was recorded live and there's video of it. The final track, Nighttime Disguise, is a love letter to their older and heavier sound, even featuring some growls there in the end, and insane drum performance by Bard too. So yeah, this song is also, fun fact, is a collaboration between the band and its fans who contributed with the songwriting while they were in the studio, and it's very cool stuff. So another aspect that I love about it's production. So not only their sound design is great, but also the videos and overall graphic production. It really makes a difference, and I appreciate how much love and care these guys put into every video they make and everything they do. Like, definitely worth a watch. So I'm glad they're back on tour now, and I feel super jealous of the folks in Europe who are able to experience the songs live.
Did you ever see them live?
No, never.
Mm.
And yeah, I mean, I think I made my point about how much I love this album, how much it means to me, and I was able to connect with. And hopefully, some of you guys listening at home were able to experience the same. It's definitely special. Yeah, Leprous affiliate.
You know, I'll admit that Leprous are one of those bands that I too easily overlooked, because I presumed from the name
Yeah,
that
it
there would
always
be
happens.
Cookie Monster vocals. You know, I just presumed it,
Yeah.
which is a shameful thing to have done, because far from it, really. They remind me, well, this album reminds me a lot of Riverside, which is always a good thing. Great dark melodies, incredible lead vocals.
Well,
Not
he's one
what
of
I
the best
expected at all.
singers in the world. He's amazing. Einar is just awesome.
Yeah.
His range is insane. I mean, they've been pretty consistent. Really, all their albums were pretty great. Pitfalls had some phenomenal moments. I think this one is right in line with that one. Nighttime Disguise is great. Silent Revelation, amazing. There's a few new kind of elements on this one, which are cool. And again, for this band, though, I think it all boils down to connecting with them, seeing them live. They're one of the most impressive live bands you'll see out there today. And it really, once you get a chance to see them in concert, it changes your whole perspective on them. It's just amazing. They're really special. And I think hopefully they continue to build on what they've been doing. They're so close, it feels like, to breaking through, to being a bigger level act. Like what, I mean, to me, they're every bit as good as like a Muse, so I'd love to see them get more notoriety. All right, great, man. I knew you loved that record. That makes a lot of sense for you to
For sure.
have
Yeah,
that as your favorite.
it has to be here.
Yeah. All right, Kyle, your last one.
Next year, I hope there's a new Caligula's horse or something. You got to have one of those two.
They swap.
Versus-
Yeah.
Or
It's just
Riverside. Yeah, one of
Yeah.
those.
Yeah.
I didn't listen to Leprous for a while either, Nick, because of the name. That'd be a fun list, is like band names that don't match the band and their sound, and that's like top of the list. All right, we're gonna go with one of my favorite bands. This is gonna be the Neil Morse Band, which I'll get to. It's actually NMB now, Innocence and Danger. And so it's always a good year if we get a new album from Neil Morse, which we always do. But specifically NMB, which, to be honest, has been easily one of my favorite projects that he's been associated with over the past, whenever it's been since they started calling themselves the Neil Morse Band, last 7-8 years. So they've changed the name. It has a new font, a new logo, that sort of thing. And it's meant to signal the collaborative nature of the group, which they were going to be called the Grand Experiment, but went with Neil Morse Band. And then I think later maybe regretted that. I also feel weird talking about this band when Geoff is here, because I feel like no matter what I say, you know more than I do about this band, Geoff. But fact check me if I get this wrong. One thing I had read is that Neil entered these writing sessions with less material than ever before. As far as I know, maybe even no demos. Is that accurate? Yeah.
I think so.
And so I think the result is that, to me and to my ear, this album feels a little bit more influenced by Bill Eubauer. And it reminds me of We Came From Space, which is a band that I really like. At least elements of this album, especially the shorter, the innocent songs on the first disc. And for me, that's sort of like a late 70s, early 80s, almost like power pop, classic rock vibe. Songs like Another Story to Tell, which made my favorite songs of the year. I love that song. And Bird on a Wire. So just cool, like early 80s, late 70s sound. That's what my ear picks up on. Of course, if Neil's involved, and with this group, you're going to get an epic, and in fact, you get two, and so you get Not Afraid Part 2, and then the 31-minute mammoth Beyond the Years. This is interesting, though, because Liquid Tension, I have sort of a similar maybe issue with, and it's with the sequencing of the album. For me with Liquid Tension, I would have sequenced it differently. I would have gotten some of those more ad-lib moments into the actual disc itself. We've been talking about this throughout this podcast about you got an 80-minute album, it feels too long. You got a 40-minute album, maybe that's the right thing. But when you're dealing with this much music, how do you put it onto 2 discs? I think it was clever to do like the Innocence disc with the short songs and then, the Danger disc with the long songs, but it almost feels kind of uneven to me a little bit to have 2 epics side by side.
Mike actually had said in one of those track by track clips that they posted that I think it was Not Afraid Part 2 was actually going to be the opening track on the record.
That's what it was. Yeah. Somehow I attributed that to Geoff, but it was Mike Portnoy, Geoff Portnoy. But I wonder how the album would come across if it were sequenced that way, which, it's not. So what is it worth discussing, I guess? But for me, by the time the album ends, I'm like maybe a little bit tired on some level. But I love it. I love those opening tracks personally the most. But what I really appreciate about this album is just the diverse nature of it and the mix of it. And so just another great album from this band.
It's funny that you say that. I mean, I could easily just have the second disc with the 2 long epics and be happy.
Well, I think we have different tastes, maybe. I find myself liking the shorter songs as I get older. I don't know.
Those are 2 of the best epics Neil and those guys have made. Yeah. They're amazing, both of them. It's hard to even distinguish sometimes between the 2. But Beyond the Years is something else, man.
Yeah.
That is
really... I mean, I love the first album, the first disc. I love A Place in the Sun specifically. But I could live with just the second one. I could just have that one, and I'm good.
Yeah, it's a weird mix. I think what you're talking about in terms of sequencing, which sort of happens to me as well. It's just that there's that middle of the record, which there's the 2 long epics in the not long epics, but like 2 sort of 8, 9, 10-minute songs in the beginning, and the 2 long ones in the end, and then in the middle, it's all kind of the shorter pop stuff. Mm-hmm. And I wonder what it would be like if it was sort of mix and match between some of the mixing them up, how that would feel. Like maybe that's what you're referring to, but another great collection of music by these guys. Another band that can do no wrong, really. But Geoff, I'm sorry, I think I cut you off.
No, I mean, I was just going to say, I mean, it's a colossal musical endeavor. There's just so much happening in that album. I like the fact that sort of disc 1 is separate from the rest, and I think they work together. As I think disc 1 for me works really well as a standalone album. If that was all we got, I certainly wouldn't have been disappointed. But I mean, the epics aren't clearly just afterthoughts or bonus tracks. They are really high quality. And I suppose the first time, since 2015, which was their first album together, that we've seen NMB, working outside the constraints of a concept album, and bringing in, the writing skills of all the band members, and indeed, the arranging skills as well, because part of the skill here is taking all of the relatively short bits and ideas and putting them all together. And a shout out as well for the cover of Bridge Over Troubled Water, which I know on the Morse Fest live stream was just an incredible experience. So yeah, there's so many good things to be said about the album.
It does feel so similar to the Grand Experiment. It even has a cover of a classic song, and I would have sequenced that album differently too. But anyway, I'll shut up about sequencing. So I love that the bonus disc tracks on there. So I'll never be happy. So. Eric's voice in particular on this one is great. Anytime he gets a chance to shine, it's always a good time too.
Yeah. Eric's voice is kind of the centerpiece of the album for me, and he proved that at Morse Fest. Pulled off every note.
Him and Bill amazing. Really sing a lot on this record, more than in previous albums. At least it feels that way.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with what Geoff was saying. It seems like Bill contributed more than ever compositionally. And wow, you know, the band just continues to progress and mature, and gotta love them.
Yep.
If you're in Prague, you gotta love NMB.
Well, I'm assuming we have a long sit down for the next one, that the final album on this that Geoff's going to talk about. So why don't you go ahead?
Well, I'm sure everyone will probably know what has been saved to last. I think when Personal Shopper, the first single from the Future Bites, dropped, many of us were what? Don't know why everybody's laughing.
Yeah, no,
Okay,
it's
no,
weird.
sorry, I wanted to throw a bit of a curveball there. Yeah, I mean, clearly, and I will talk about the Future Bites whenever we get to our honorable mentions. But obviously, Transatlantic, the Absolute Universe, it seems, we're releasing the 5th of February, and it seems like an album that's been with us for the whole year, and indeed for some of us who got to review it a little bit even earlier than that. I was laughing earlier on when we were talking about, isn't it great that some albums are 40 minutes and 35 minutes, and then we have the Absolute Universe. Again, an album that began to be worked on in September 2019, and probably one of the first fully formed works that touches upon the pandemic, certainly was affected by it. And what did Transatlantic try and do? Well, they had a lot of material. They decided to do something pretty much unprecedented by putting out two versions of the album, but not just a long one and a short one. The album was reworked into two separate albums. And what can be said about it? It's Transatlantic back, always a highlight. And back with an incredibly good album. Strong input from every single band member the whole way throughout it. Highlights, it's really hard to pick stuff out, but when that first single landed of the Overture and Reaching for the Sky, it was a real signal of what was to come. The album, is just extensive, and again, an album that you can keep going back to in each of its forms and hearing new and different things. It's also given us 12 months of debate and discussion around which version is better. And of course, there are indeed 3 versions, because there is the ultimate version on the Blu-ray. Personally, I'm a fan of the Breath of Life. I like kind of the conciseness of it, and I know that's probably not a common view amongst this group. We're not even going to get into that, because that's a whole podcast episode on itself. But great input from Roie in terms of stuff like Al Howl and Reaching for the Sky, Belong, Can You Feel It? The ending on Breath of Life with Greatest Story Never Ends, Into Love Made Away, the epic finale that we just love in these kind of works. This ability to play Spot the Difference, so songs that have one arrangement and set of lyrics and set of vocalists on one album, switching to another album with different vocalists, different lyrics, and we mentioned a few times about box sets, and that's pretty much a standard thing that comes now for most prog releases. Maybe sometimes even if the content might not necessarily justify it, but the ultimate edition of the Absolute Universe, 5 vinyl albums, 3 CDs, and I have to say, the Blu-ray with a 5.1 mix and the visualizer, and an entirely new version constructed of elements from both of the albums. Again, which one of our number, Mr. Levy, contributed to quite significantly. A brilliant way to enjoy that album. Back in the days of heavier lockdown, when we actually had time to sit and have a 2-hour meal of surround sound and visual incredibleness crafted between Christian Rios and Daniel. and let's hope a tour in 2022 where we get to hear it live. I mean, it's an ultimate album, and certainly a standout one for all of us, I know, for this year.
Yeah.
I think you covered
So
it.
I think you covered. I'm
Well
actually
said.
not jealous that you were the one that talked about it because it's so much to cover. But like on my personal experience, Transatlantic is my favorite band. And I think it's the band that pushed me into being like a dedicated fan because I was a fan of Dream Theater and all that. And then like when I came across like this sort of music that's so intense and it speaks so much with the listener, it's when I became a really dedicated fan. And working on that visualizer was some of the most insane privilege and honor I have ever done, and it even makes me a little bit emotional talking about it. But I really hope we can see these guys live. um, it's beyond words what this album means to me, so I'm really glad
Yep.
we can all share this together.
Yes,
Yeah.
that was me.
Amazing, amazing album and collection. I mean, you're right, Jeff. That box set is really something great. It's such a nice package to have, and worth it for all that comes with it. Those guys did an amazing thing
Well,
this
a
year with that.
catchphrase of the pandemic was unprecedented. That was a word that
It
kept
was,
coming
yeah.
up, and on some level, this is really an unprecedented release to do something that's not been done in music before, with the 3 different versions of the same album, and then even that release, like in the prog world, it'd be hard to find a box set that really gets on that level. So it's the perfect last album to discuss on this list because.
Yeah, absolutely.
Basically the first thing I listened to in this year, and it really is just, there's been nothing that's matched it for me. And I also have to give a shout out to Solitude, which I know is on some level a controversial track because of Pete's vocals, but I love them. I think it's great, and lyrically and emotionally, that's my favorite track of the year.
Great song. I like that song. So
Me too.
recapping the last round, which was again, my memory has just been terrible. Styx, Frost, Leprous, NMB, and Transatlantic. So great
What a round.
15 albums here. It's been an awesome year, and we left out so many amazing records. So we've gone a bit long here on this podcast. So let's try and do a few minutes of real fast honorable mentions. Jeff, why don't you go ahead and give us yours, which I think we know what it is.
Well, I've got a couple. I love the Future Bites, and I think probably that I love the concept. I think it has loads of strong moments in it. I love the packaging. Again, it's the most hilarious box set you've ever seen in your life, including a blank disc and a blank CD and all sorts of stuff. I think probably the thing I would say about it is that having not had the opportunity to tour it, I mean, I think seeing those songs in live context could have maybe brought it into the context of the whole oeuvre, and to an extent, it's a shame that probably it'll be overshadowed by the Porcupine Tree reunion. But I still listen to it a lot. I love it on headphones. It's just an insane listening experience. Quick mention to 3 other things. Transatlantic came out at the start of the year. Dave Bainbridge's To the Far Away has literally just landed, and I've really been enjoying it. Dave's obviously featured a couple of times here, and I suppose it's a little bit of a shame that it's a late 2021 release that we may not get to pick up next year. We've mentioned Rob Reid before. There's a new Magenta EP has just landed. He also has produced the part 1 of a brilliant instrumental album, which is going to be a 2-album set called The Ringmaster, which I really enjoyed. And finally, to show that I do listen to all of you very occasionally, over the last couple of weeks, I've been really enjoying Riverside, the 20-year anniversary album, the shorts and the longs. You guys have been encouraging me to like them or listen to them for a long time, and to be honest, I kind of probably have had a preconception of what they might sound like. But the kickoff, The Story of My Dream, the new track, I really enjoyed it.
That's a great song.
I've dived into that compilation. And actually, there's so many brilliant moments that
Mhm.
that have a whole catalog there to go and discover for the first time. So
Nice.
I'm excited about that for next year.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Riverside was gonna be my honorable mention because I know we had to give it a shout out. And Story of My Dream, I was just on a trip a couple weeks back, a road trip. I listened to that song too many times. And yeah, so Riverside for sure. Also a quick mention of Kinglet, a cool new band, has an EP out called Tangerine. Really cool if you like instrumental stuff like Scale the Summon and Animals as Leaders. And yeah, also The Future Bites. You gotta check it out.
Quick mention for PFM, Premiata for Neria Marconi. I Dreamed of Electric Sheep. Very orchestral, cinematic, but it's got that PFM flair that we all love with a punchy sound. Do you guys know, some people pronounce it Sun, others pronounce it Soen.
Yeah.
For
Soen,
all you
yeah.
Tool fans out there.
It was a good album. Yeah.
Great album.
The
Yeah.
album Imperial, really good. And this year I discovered an Australian prog band called Terra Maze, who released a very fine album, Sorella Minore, which has got a great song on it called Between These Shadows, amongst others. So give it a listen.
Yeah. I also
Really
listened to that one the first time a couple weeks back. Really, really good.
Yeah, great band.
Kyle, what do
Great
you got?
band.
Just some kind of major releases from legacy artists. Jethro Tull had an album. Steve Hackett
No,
started the
Jethro
year
Tull
with
comes
one.
out next year.
Oh, is that next year? Okay, well,
The single's out.
they had a song out. Okay. Saga had an album, and we can't not mention Saga.
Right.
So
Symmetry
have
was
an
really
album, right?
cool. It was like a reworking,
good.
acoustic reworking of the stuff they did. It was really good.
And we mentioned, is it Novena or Novena?
Novena.
I
Novena.
shouldn't have even tried to do this. They had a good EP. It had some great tracks. It showed up on our favorite songs.
That EP was solid. Yeah, good shout out for that. Yeah, I got a few. One I recently discovered, which is really cool, called it's a band called Others by No One. The album's called Book 2 Stories from Nowhere, I believe. And if you like Between the Buried and Me, but sort of even crazier, if I may, that would be like that. It's Between the Buried and Me meets Deer Hunter meets Devin Townsend or something. Really
cool.
just insane, fun, cool stuff.
Maybe good music if you're having a massage.
Definitely. I'm gonna give a shout out to the Ray Wilson album, Weight of a Man, which one of my favorites this year. I love his voice, and it's a great album. And the Jason Bieler album, which Songs from the Apocalypse, which is not a full-on prog record, but a lot of prog moments. Has a lot of guests: Devin Townsend, Todd Latore, a few other people. Some great musical moments on there. So I like that one a lot. And Robbie Steinhardt's posthumous release, which I really like as well. This We're Not in Kansas Anymore, I believe it's called. And just a fun, great record, just awesome. If you're a Kansas fan, it's definitely one you don't want to sleep on. It's a nice tribute to his legacy, and he sings great on it. There's a nice different take on Dust in the Wind, which is worth checking out. So, God, I think we should. I want to give a shout out to, although we don't do a lot on this band and we don't talk about them too much, but the Mastodon album Hushed and Grim was actually really solid. And a lot of people are really high on that record this year. That might be one you want to check out as well if you like things on the heavier side. That's one we should give a shout out to as well. So, man, that's a lot of music, a lot of things.
And I'm
to
sure we
cover.
forgot someone.
Please go ahead.
No, I'm sure we forgot
Oh,
someone.
I thought you had one that we forgot. Yeah, it's been a crazy year, 2021. And we also have the Prog Report Awards, which I probably have announced by now. By the time we air this, I don't know how things have worked out. So again, thanks to everybody thanks to these guys on the podcast for all their contributions, and to Vic and Kyle Graves and everybody else that's written for us this year. It's been a crazy, intense year of dealing with COVID and all this music and everything. So it's been hard for everybody, but hopefully you've enjoyed the podcast and the music, and we've gotten you through some of these times. And thank you for everybody for checking out ProgReport.com and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and our podcasts and YouTube channel and blah, blah, blah. And we'll try to keep it going through 2022. And
sure.
That's it. Happy holidays, Happy New Year, and we'll see you on the other side.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you, guys. Happy New
Enjoy
Year.
yourselves.
Bye.
You scums.
Bye.